Here's lesson 4. We'll be adding them, subtracting them, multiplying them, and dividing them. You can find all of our videos on mymathmanual.com. Alright, first off, we're going to start by explaining different decimal places. The first one, we're going to start with the ones place. Next, we're going to talk about is the tenths place. It's right on the left-hand side of the ones place. Next, we're going to talk about the hundredths place. It's right next to the tenths on the left-hand side. Next one, we're talking about the thousands place. Will be right next to the hundredths place. Next spot will be the 10,000s place. As you can see here, we have the ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, 10,000s, and you can keep going. So many different decimal places. The further you go, the more zeros will you have. So this can go on to infinity. Now we'll be able to move backwards. So these will become decimals. These are whole numbers, and these are fractions of a whole number. These will become decimals. So the first place will be the tenths place. If you write this 1 over 10 in a regular form, if you divide this out, you would get 0.1. The 0 in front of the point just signifies that there's a decimal here. Sometimes the decimal is so small you can't really tell. The next one, space over, will be the hundredths place. And this will be written as 0.01. The next one we're talking about is the thousands place, right next to that. The next one will be 10,000s. The thousands can be wrote out as 0.001. And the 10,000s can just add one more zero, so 3 zeros after the decimal place. So let's write down a number starting from 10,000 and ending in the 10,000s place. As you can see here, the decimal is right here. The 0 is in the ones place, the 4 is in the tens place, the 3 is in the hundredths place, the 5 is in the thousands place, the 2 is in the 10,000s place. Now if you go to the right of the decimal, here is the tenths place, the 4 is the hundredths place, the 2 is the thousands place, and the 1 is the 10,000s place. So when you're counting from the right of the decimal, you start off at the tenths, not the ones. Example 1. In this example, we'll talk about making decimals into fractions. The first decimal that we're going to change is 0.1. To change this into a fraction, we're going to multiply it by 10 over 10, which is just 1. So multiply 10 over 10. If you change this the way it looks right now into something as one fraction, it would look like this. As you can see here, we moved the 0.1 on top and kept the 10 on the bottom on both. This way, when you multiply the 0.1 to the 10, this just becomes a 1 because you move the decimal over one place to the right, as seen as this example. So when you multiply this out, it becomes a 1 on top and a 10 on bottom. So change this, it becomes this. Second example, we have 0.10. To make this into a whole number, you would move this decimal 2 places over. So you have 1, 2 places over. So the decimal would end up right here. This would look like, so we have 2 decimal places in this change to the whole number. What would happen if we only had 1 decimal place over? Now we move it over 1 place, and this would equal 1.0. And this is just 1 decimal place. So depending on what you want to see at the end, you just move it how many decimal places you want it. So if you want a whole number, it being 10, move it 2 places. If you want just 1, you just move it over 1. Okay, the third example. Say we have 0.26. To change this into a fraction, we would need to move it over 2 decimals to make it a whole number. So you can see here, we moved it over 2 decimal places to make this decimal at the end of this. Now, we place the 26 on the top of the fraction, and since we have 2 decimal places, we write 2 zeros underneath with as 100. If we just had 1 decimal place, it'd just be a 10. The 2 decimal place would be 100, the 3 would be 1,000, and so on and so forth. So this to change the 0.26 into 26 hundredths, this is how you would do it. If you have 0.26 again, but you only want to make the fraction in 2.6 over 10, you could also do that. All you'd have to do is move it over one decimal place. So 0.26 moved over to one place becomes 2.6 over 10. So it depends on where you move the decimal, it becomes your fraction. So if you move it over one place, you just add a 10. Move over two places, you just put it under 100. Three places, you put it under 1,000. And you move the decimal accordingly to what place you have it under. Moving on to example number 4. Say we have 24.6. How would we make this into a fraction? Well, the decimal just needs to be moved over once. So we move the fraction, or you move the decimal over one place. Since we moved it over one place, we keep track of that. So I usually just put one place. And this would equal 246 over 10. It's over 10 because we moved it only one place. If we had moved it two places, we would have put it under 100. So this 24.6 as a fraction is 246 over 10. Example number 5. Say you had 560.1412. Now to make this into a fraction, we would have to move it over 4 places, so the decimal would have to end up here. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it'd be a total of 4 places. Since we're going to have 4 places, we're going to have 4 zeros on our bottom fraction. So it's going to be 10,000 on the bottom. So let's make this into a fraction now. So the number would be 5,601,412 over 10,000. And that would be what we get after we make it into a fraction. Example number 6. Now, in this example, will be a little bit different than most. We're going to take a fraction and turn it into a decimal. Say we have 18 over 10. Now we only have 1 0 here, so let's keep track of that. 1 0. This will tell us how many places we're going to need to move over the decimal. So this will be equal to 18. Now we only have 1 0, so we need to move it over to the left one place. So we move it over to the left one place. This would look like 1.8. So we have 18 over 10 becomes 1.8. Example number 7. Say we have 1800 over 1000. We just count the 3 zeros on the bottom, so we have 3 zeros, and this will tell us how many decimal places we're going to need to move this over. So this would be equal to 1800. And the decimal places over here in these whole numbers are always at the very end. We commonly do not put those there because it's already well known, but we're just going to put it there for right now. So you can tell where it is and where we need to move it. So we need to move it 3 places to the left. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. So the new decimal place will end up right here. And so that would equal 1.800. Example number 8. Say we have 18 over 10,000. So we have 4 zeros here. And this, we write down 18 first. And the decimal we're going to put right here. And now we're going to move it 4 places. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And since we have these empty spaces, we usually put zeros right there to indicate that there's empty space. So we have 4 places moved, so the decimal would end up in the front, and adding 2 zeros because there's 2 empty spaces right here. Now this would equal 0.0018, and this other 0 in front of the decimal is just a placeholder to indicate that there's a decimal here. So if you take 18 over 10,000, you would get this number. This next section we'll be talking about adding and subtracting numbers that have decimals in it. First example, we'll be adding 1.2 plus 2.60 plus 0.123. So it's easier to keep track of these numbers. We're going to write these in a vertical fashion, keeping the decimals lined up with each other. Since these numbers don't line up with anything, we'll add zeros so we can see which column they fall under. So when adding this, we're looking at the first column here, then the second column, third column, and then the fourth column. If they don't have any numbers above them, there's always zeros above them, just as a placeholder. When adding these numbers up, we have 3 here, a 2 here. We have 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 here. And then bring down our decimal right here. Then we put our 3 here. So now you just look at the columns and you add them up. Bring down your decimal, and this is your answer to the question that we have here. Example number 2, say we're adding 2.65 plus 4.456 plus 0.06923. So now we just move these in a vertical column. Make sure to line up the decimal with the places in order. Then adding in the zeros so you can see what's above the other numbers that don't have numbers above them. Now looking at each column and adding up the numbers in there. So we have a 3, a 2, a 15, and put the 1 up here. So we have a 5 down here. Then we have a 17, and the 1 goes up here. Then we have 11, and the 1 goes up here. And then adding these numbers up, we have a 7. And don't forget to bring down the decimal place. So we have 7.17523 as your answer. Example number 3, we're going to do something a little bit different. We'll be subtracting decimal places. First we have 2.10 minus 1.50. Now the same thing happens here. We line up the decimals in a vertical column. First we bring down the 0, and since 5 can't be subtracted by 1, we have to borrow from the 2. And since you're borrowing 1 over here, we add 1 over here, which would make it 11. Now we have 5 minus 11, which would give us 6. 1 minus 1 is 0, and don't forget to bring down the decimal. So our final answer, or product, is 0.60. Example number 4, we have 3.16 minus 0.941. Same thing happens here. We just make these two numbers in a vertical column, lining up the decimal with the actual lining up the columns that match the same numbers. Now we add in the 0 above the 1, so we can see that it's just being subtracted by 0. The 0 is just a placeholder. First thing we would have to do, since this is a 0, we have to borrow 1 from the 6, which would turn it to a 5. Then the 0 would become a 10. Now you subtract 10 from 1 and you get 9. You subtract the 5 from the 4 and you get 1. Now we have to borrow because 9 is greater than 1. We have to borrow from the 3, this becomes a 2, and the 1 becomes an 11. So 9 subtracted from 11 would be 2. And you bring down your decimal. And since we just have a 2 subtracted from the 0, you just bring down the 2. In this next section, we'll be talking about multiplying numbers that have decimals. Example 1, we have 16.9 multiplied by 4.2. First thing we're going to do is change these decimals into fractions. The first one, we would have to move one place over to make it into a fraction. And the same thing with this one, we just have to move one place over. Now we have a whole number here and a whole number here. The one is indicating how many zeros we're going to have in the bottom fraction. So it would be under 10. And also the same thing here. And we're going to be multiplying these together. All you have to do is multiply the tops. We've done this before. You do 169 multiplied by 42, which would equal 7,098. Now you have two zeros, you're just adding them together, so it would be over 100. Now we change this fraction back into a decimal. So take the top number, and remember we have a decimal here, and since it's over 100 and it has two zeros, we'll move the two decimal. So this would equal 70.98. And this is our answer. Example 2, we'll have 0.21 multiplied by 0.02. Okay, we're going to change these back into fractions. To do this, we move this one over 2 decimal places and move this one over 3 decimal places. As you can see here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now we write the whole numbers underneath them and count how many and record how many places we moved them. So in this one we have 3 places, and this one we have 2 places. And we add those together, we get 5 places moved. We'll come back to that number a little bit. This one over 1,000 and this one over 100. And multiply this. All you have to do is multiply the top numbers together, which would equal 441. To see how many this is under, we count how many zeros we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we put this over 100,000. And then to change this back into a decimal, we just take the top number and put our decimal here and move it 5 places to the left. And since we have 2 empty slots here, we put zeros in there. So our new number would be 0.00441. And this would be our answer. Example number 3. This time we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a shortcut way. Say we're multiplying 22.1 times 0.02. When you're multiplying vertically, make sure that your end digits stop. Don't shift them where the decimal places line up. Make sure the end columns line up with each other, and don't add any zeros. Now, the trick here is to see how many places are being counted after decimal. There's 1 here and 2 here. Now you do your multiplication. You get this, you get 442. Now to put the decimal place, you add these up, you get 3. So you put decimal here and move it over 3. 1, 2, 3. The decimal will end up in the front. So your answer would be 0.442. And this is the shortcut way. All you do, count how many places after the decimal for each number you're multiplying, add those decimal places up, the number of decimal places, and then move that over to the left. So we'll do 31 divided by 2. Since I know this is not going to come out to an even, we're going to add a decimal here and a 0 to keep track of where the decimal will be in our answer. And also, since the decimal is here, I'll put a decimal above that. How many times I can go this number into 2 would be 1. And so it'd just be 1 time, so I'd have a 2 here. So 2 minus 3. And since this, we need to bring down the 1 here. So how many does 2 go into 11? I would say 5. So we know that 2 times 5 is 10. If you subtract these, you get 1. And we bring down the 0. And we know this can also go into 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. So the answer would be 15.5 if we divide the 31 by 2. Okay, and then we're going to show you how to make this into a fraction. So we already know how to do that. So we go over 1 place, and we have 155 over 10. And this would be the same as this. This doesn't have a decimal. Example number 2. In this example, we'll do 14.7 divided by 7. So 7 can go into 14 2 times. 7 times 2 is 14. If you subtract those, you get a 0. If you bring down your 7, then you will see that 7 can go into 1 time. 7 times 1 is 7. So your final answer for this one will be 2.1. To make that into a fraction, you move this over 1 place. You bring that 21 over as a whole number, and since it's under 1 place, it's under 10. So it'd be 21 over 10. And this will be your final answer. That is not a decimal. Example number 3, almost like this second one, but we have 14.7 divided by 0.07. In this case, we would have to move this decimal over 2 places. And since we do that, we have to move this decimal over 2 places. So our new division problem looks like something like this, with the decimal over here. So bring up the decimal. What of the multiples of 7 can go into 14? It'd be 2. 7 times 2 is 14. Subtract those and you get 0. Bring down the 7. This can go into 1 time. This also becomes 0 if you subtract those. Bring down the 0. 7 can't go into 0 anytime, so you just add a 0. So your final answer for this one would be 210.0. Or you can just write it as simply as 210. Example number 4. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have a fraction, and we're going to divide that fraction. Say we have 1/10. To do this, you put the top number inside a little division sign. So it looks like this. Don't forget to add a decimal right there and a 0 after it. Bring up the decimal, and the bottom denominator number goes on the outside. So now we know that 10 can go into 10 1 time. Add a 0 in the front so you can see this decimal. Your final answer would be 0.1. So this would equal 0.1. And that would be your final answer. Example number 5. Say we have a fraction of 2/3. Remember to put the top number within the division sign. Add a decimal and put a 0. In this case, we're going to add a little more zeros than necessary. You will see in a second. Now add the denominator, the bottom number, to the outside. Since 3 cannot go into 2, we have to go, how many times can 3 go into 20? Remember to add the decimal at the top. The closest number I can think of that 3 can go into 20 is 6. 3 times 6, 18. Subtract the two of them, you're left with 2. Bring down the 0, and you're also left with 20 again. We just did this one. Our answer was 6. 3 times 6, 18. You subtract those, and you get 2. You bring down the 0, and you get 20 again. We already did this, is 6. So you see here, we have a repeating decimal. To write this repeating decimal, instead of writing every single number out, we would simply write this notation. 0.6 with a bar over it, meaning repeating. And this would be our final answer. And thank you for watching.